Hey guys, it's Linux. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys a variation on Handlock that I kind of worked up. And I mean, it's been inspired by other certain variations of Handlock, and I played it quite a few times in the ladder. It's held up quite well. I played it quite a bit last season. I played it some this season. It's had variable success depending on what classes are being played in the ladder. I'll go over it a little more in depth once I show the cards in the deck. So this is the deck. It runs 2 Soulfires, 2 Mortal Coils, 1 Power Overwhelming, 2 Ancient Watchers, 2 Ironbeak Owls, 2 Sunfury Protectors, Arcane Golem, 2 Earthen Ring Farseers, 1 Hellfire, 2 Shadow Flames, 2 Chillwind Yetis, Defender of Argus, Leroy Jenkins, 2 Senjin, 2 Faceless, 1 Siphon Soul, and you got 2 Mountain Giants and 2 Molten Giants. So for the most part, it kind of does look like a Handlock deck. Some things you might notice right away that make it a little bit different from your standard Handlock deck is the lack of Twilight Drakes and 1 Defender of Argus, and probably 1 Hellfire and 1 Siphon Soul, because the old Handlock decks used to play 2 Hellfires. They played 2 Siphon Souls as well. Not all the lists run 2 Faceless as well, but I think the 2 Faceless give you more opportunities to get Giants on board. It gives you more opportunities to have lethal with big burst combos. That's another reason I like Arcane Golem in this deck as well, because it gives the deck more burst potential. So not only do you have Leroy to do like a 20 damage burst on turn 10, you now have Arcane Golem, which can do you can do a 16 damage burst, I believe, on turn 9. So it actually can go off a turn sooner than Leroy, which is pretty good. And there's just a lot of burst potential in this deck, and that's one of the reasons I really like it. So I'm going to explain why there's no Twilight Drakes in this deck, and the reason behind no Twilight Drakes is when I built this deck, a lot of the meta was Druid, and it was Druid, Rogue, and Shaman was the majority of the meta, and Twilight Drakes are typically weak against Druid, and they're really weak against Shaman if they have Earth Shock. Like if they have Earth Shock and they Earth Shock a Twilight Drake that you play it on turn 4 or that you coined on turn 3, and then they Earth Shock it and then can make a play, I mean, that's never good. Like almost never. But and then obviously you have Druids who can Keeper the Grove it and then kind of force you to trade your Drake into their Keeper. But I feel like Twilight Drake is really good in the Rogue matchup, though. I mean, Handlock is already so good against Rogue. I felt like you didn't really need Twilight Drake to still excel at that matchup. But I feel like this deck, like the times I've played it against Shaman and Druid, it's worked a lot better for me than the older version of the deck. So it runs 2 Chillwind Yetis and 2 Senjin Shield Masters. That's quite different from your typical Handlock deck. It gives you more opportunities to play stuff at 4, so it gives you more opportunities to have a 4-drop on turn 4, which is usually the tip to playing Handlock is mulligan your cards so you have a good 4-drop. Typically a Mountain Giant. It really depends on the matchup. In the old Handlock deck, you'd like to mulligan for your Twilight Drake or your Mountain Giants. You'd ideally like to have both. This deck, like if you're getting Chillwind Yeti in your starting hand, Mountain Giant, those are cards you keep in your starting hand because you really want a good turn 4. Yeah, and Arcane Golem, great burst potential with your Faceless Manipulators, Power Overwhelming, as is Leroy. It's just more opportunities. Like I feel like most decks, most people are expecting just the Leroy combo out of a Handlock deck. So if you play your Leroy early and get them in range of an Arcane Golem burst on the next turn, and I mean I've done this before, and I've actually done this before against pretty high legend players, and it's worked. Like I've dropped Leroy a turn before I was going to go off with Arcane Golem, and I got them in range enough to the point where an Arcane Golem faceless combo would kill them on the turn after, and they didn't heal up because they thought my burst potential was out after I dropped Leroy. He thought that I played Leroy prematurely, but in fact I was setting up a lethal with Arcane Golem, which is a card you don't see too often in Handlock decks. I think there was a variation of Handlock that had an Arcane Golem in it recently, but I put it on. I just put it in there because I really like it. So anyhow, the reasoning behind one Hellfire is Hellfire is a good board clear, but when you're committing your entire turn 4 to playing Hellfire over one of the vast amount of 4-drops that you have, I feel like you're not doing all that much, because you're still giving your opponent initiative the next turn to play their creatures. So while you do board clear, you're still gonna be behind on board unless you still have a board after you Hellfired with like a Mountain Giant on it or something. So yeah, that's in there. It's really good against Shaman, but this deck's a little better against Shaman than the previous Handlock decks, in my opinion. So I think one fits it just fine. One Argus is in there because you are running 2 Sen'jin Shield Masters, so you don't really need that much taunt. You do have your standard 2 Sunfury Protectors to give taunt in the same way that Argus would, and Argus is a pretty high mana card, so the Sunfury Protector is just a lot more flexible. And while Argus can be good, and he is good in certain situations, I feel like one of them is enough here, because this deck already plays enough 4s to the point where, like, you know, it can't handle like another Argus in the curve. I feel like it's fine as it is. And Molten Giant's another card. Like I've experimented taking Molten Giant in and out of this deck before, and taking Molten Giant out of the deck, Molten Giant can win you games, like on turns where you can play Molten Giant and play, like, you can play both Molten Giants or Molten Giant Faceless Sunfury Protector. In games where you can do that, it'll usually put you in the lead, and you'll probably end up winning most of those games, but you're not going to be able to do that every time, and in certain matchups, you usually don't want your life total to be in range to a point where you can play Molten Giants for free or close to free, because you're likely to die on the turns after, and a lot of high-level players play around the possibility of you having Molten Giant anyways. So I feel like if you take Molten Giant out of your deck, like, they'll still play around you possibly having it, so it'll essentially feel like your deck has 32 cards in it, because they'll play around you having Molten Giant even if you don't have it. But so I mean, there's just certain matchups where Molten Giant's useless, and like, if you see a lot of those coming up, like, you can take it out of the deck and replace it. You can even replace it with the 2 Twilight Drakes that aren't in this deck. There's a lot you can do with that space. Like, there's matchups like Rogue is alright. It depends on what Rogue. The aggro Rogue, it is probably best to have the Molten Giant's Miracle Rogue. You're probably not going to be able to use them because they'll kill you with huge burst anyways. So Shaman, you're unlikely to be playing Molten Giants during any point of that game, because they typically kill you with big burst as well. I mean, you might be able to play them. They might win you the game. I don't know. There's just like Druid too. Druid likes to keep you around 14 HP, so they can go off on you with combo usually. That's another matchup where, like, I've played decks that don't run Molten Giants, and I've done just fine in them. But I managed to fit the Molten Giants in this deck, so I mean, they've been working fine, so I just kept them. So Basically, how you want to mulligan this deck is typically how you want to mulligan, as is typically how you want to mulligan any Handlock deck. You want to chuck cards like Soulfire, Mortal Coil. Well, Mortal Coil isn't the worst card that could be in your starting hand though. Like if you think they're gonna play Aggro Paladin or something where Mortal Coil can get you a lot of value, then keeping it isn't the worst idea. But you're essentially just trading this for a random card. So I don't know that I wouldn't keep it in my hand really. Powerful Overwhelming is a card you can chuck out of your hand. Like you don't have to worry about it. Ancient Watcher, I like to keep Ancient Watcher in my hand, and it does depend on the matchup. Like I really like Ancient Watcher against Druid in certain other matchups as well. This is a fine card to keep in your hand. Typically you want to go for your 4-drops though, but I think Ancient Watchers, like if he winds up in your hand at the start, like unless you really want to aggressively go for your 4s, which isn't a bad idea, you can keep him in most cases. And he combos great with Iron Beak Owl, Sunfury Protectors. I usually don't want to keep Sunfury Protector in my hand unless the deck I'm playing against is likely to be very, very aggro oriented, and in which case Sunfury Protector is not the worst. But in any control or slow matchup, you want to get rid of Sunfury Protector from your starting hand. Arcane Golem, you should never keep this card in your starting hand. You want it later on in the game for big burst damage, or for even a attack to the face into a Shadow Flame potentially, which I've found actually doesn't work too bad on him either. Earthen Ring Farseer, this is a tricky one actually. Earthen Ring Farseer is a great card. It's a good 3-drop. It allows you to, like if you don't have any good 4s on your turn 4, like this deck is likely to have a good 4-drop on your turn 4. I mean, between Mountain Giant, Senjin, Chillwind Yeti, and like you're likely to get some 4 to play. And I mean, even if you don't, Earthen Ring Farseer, like if you're going second, it allows you to coin life tap so you can try to get a 4-drop because you'll have a strong turn 3 by playing Earthen Ring Farseer. And that's another thing. Coin life tap. You should coin life tap when you don't have a strong turn 4 in your hand, and you're trying to really aggressively look for one. Is essentially what it is. And you should only really do that if you have a strong turn on turn 3 with a drop, be it Ancient Watcher or Earthen Ring Farseer on turn 3. You want something to play on those turns while looking for the 4-drop. So yeah. In Hellfire, I've kept it against people who I suspect are playing Zoo and other aggro decks. I mean, it's not horrible. It's far from horrible in those matchups, but since the deck only runs 1, like I'm less likely to draw into it. So if I get it, and I know it's going to be something like that matchup, I'll probably keep it in my hand. It really depends though. So Shadow Flame's a card I won't keep in my hand because it relies on me having a card to combo it out with, which is usually Arcane Golem or Ancient Watcher or what have you. Chillwind Yeti, great card. If that's in my starting hand, I'm likely to keep it. Defender of Argus, probably not. Yeah, I don't think you'd ever keep Defender. If anything, you'd keep Sunfury Protector, but never Defender. And like it really depends on the matchup. Like even if they're aggro, you don't want to keep Defender because you have to make a 4-drop stick or make any of these drops stick before you can play Defender on 4 anyways. And I mean that's really unlikely, I think. So I wouldn't keep Defender. Like if you're expecting aggro, try to get Sunfury instead. Leroy, nah, this is another card like Arcane Golem, using it for the big burst, so no need to keep it in your starting hand. Senjin Shieldmaster is a, once again, like Chillwind Yeti, perfectly good 4-drop. I'd probably consider keeping them in my starting hand. Faceless. Faceless is a tricky one. It really depends on your draw. Like if you have a Mountain Giant in your hand, and let's say you're playing against Druid, you have a Mountain Giant in your hand, and you have a Faceless in your starting hand. In that typical situation, I consider actually keeping Faceless, and like I mean, even against Rogue too. Like if you have the Mountain Giant, and then like you're gonna play your Mountain Giant on turn 4, and you have Faceless. So if that Mountain Giant sticks, and you play Faceless on turn 5, that lead is going to snowball ridiculously. Like, I mean, sometimes it does stick, and then when it sticks and you can Faceless it on turn 5, like it is so hard to lose that game. I mean, like it really is. Like that's a scenario where I want to keep my Faceless Manipulator, and like when I have a strong 4-drop, and like if that sticks, I'll Faceless it on turn 5. Like I have a strong game plan already in mind, and I know how to make a lead potentially snowball into me like practically winning the game off of 2 sets of plays. So Siphon Soul, probably I never keep this in your hand. It's really slow. Molten Giant. Molten Giant depends. Oh, I skipped Mountain Giant. Mountain Giant, always keep Mountain Giant in your hand no matter what matchup. It's just such a good card. You want that in your hand. If anything, that's the card you mulligan for. If not for a 4-drop, you mulligan for Mountain Giant because it's such a good card. Molten Giant is a tricky one. Against aggro, it's a great card. Against aggro, if it's in your starting hand, keep it, because like there's nothing more frustrating than getting on low HP and not having Molten Giant against an aggro deck. I mean, so yeah, if it's an aggro deck, feel free to keep, or if you think it's going to be an aggro deck, feel free to keep Molten Giant in your starting hand. It's fine. It should give value eventually. I think that covers this deck's basic ideas on mulligans, and it's likely I'll be doing a couple of in-game videos of this deck, maybe to give an idea on the general play style for it, and just to show you plays that I make with it and my general thought process when playing the deck. So anyhow, that's it. That's it for this explanation on this deck. I hope you found it helpful. If you play the deck, I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next video.